absolute Batman's entire story so far in less than 20 minutes. It all started with the professional MI6 spy Alfred Pennyworth coming back to Gotham for the first time because he's been on a 5-year-long hunt for a specific guy that doesn't quite laugh. Alfred was in Gotham to deal with the Party Animals, a gang that raised Gotham's murder rate by 700%, killing people left and right, as we see them literally collecting the heads of Gotham's biggest crime families. However, after receiving all the information needed, Alfred gets out of his base only to find his bike stolen, while Bruce on the other hand was in the gym peacefully grinding with his friend Waylon Jones, talking about their childhood friends who would normally be Batman's villains. Bruce eventually leaves as Gotham's mayor Jim Gordon is addressing the Party Animals situation because the entire city was low-Kirkinianly scared, only for the Party Animals to bust in with bombs trying to kill everyone, including Jim and his daughter Barbara, who's a cop in this story, until they suddenly started getting snatched up one after another by Batman, who shows up in his bulletproof suit and starts taking them all out brutally with his knives from the couch. Alfred was Ohio impressed watching everything from above as Bruce pulled out his axe and started cutting arms, ultimately scaring them all away, until Alfred pulled up from behind with his brutal 1-of-3 shotgun, only for Bruce to kick him and steal the gun like 6ix9ine stole Trippie Redd's beat. And so, not letting that slide, Alfred follows Bruce around and discovers everything about him. Just some broke 24-year-old guy called Bruce Wayne. Mom is a social worker and dad is a teacher. As a kid, Bruce was so smart that he won his class a trip to Gotham Zoo where his dad would get shot and die trying to protect the kids in his class. And from there on, Bruce loses himself for a while, but then gets inspired, graduates the best university, fakes football injury to escape duty despite being pro-level, studies criminal psychology and so many other things, which he follows up by learning the city inside out by working in the water department, power grid, and eventually becoming the engineer that he is now. And so upon discovering all of that, Alfred sneaks up on Bruce while he's talking to his mom and could have easily killed him but chose not to, stating that he's just a kid, as he instead pulls up on him later when he's in one of his hideouts in a random abandoned building, only to get shot by his own gun that Bruce had modified to be non-lethal and basically ruined it before he then drove out with a bike, making Alfred realize who had stolen his bike earlier, where he'd then go back to retreat and receive some new drops on the rich guy that never laughs, aka the Joker. But he nevertheless continues working on his case with the Party Animals while simultaneously following Batman, who is also actively fighting them. Batman's intelligence comes to display when he on the spot throws a concentrated vinegar tablet to turn the salt water into hydrochloric acid to take down some Party Animals goons and let the cops arrest them. Alfred realized how committed to the bit Batman is when he pinpointed his safe houses and saw that they literally form a bat on Gotham's map. Bruce's routine was very tight and repetitive as he mostly just worked and went to the shadows, except for the one time he made a stop to visit his father's killer, Joe Chill. And since Batman was the talk of the town, we see Mayor Gordon talking about him to his daughter and Harvey Bullock, discussing the rumors of the bat working with the resistance group called Red Hood, until Bruce's mom Martha Wayne then came in to check on Gordon because they were seemingly good friends, as he then asks her about Bruce, making her start reminiscing about his childhood and his friends and whatnot. Right as Bruce actually shows up to the poker night with all of his friends except for Selina Kyle, Bruce brings in one of the helmets of the Party Animals and lies about how he just randomly found it at work to ultimately ask them about what they could possibly know about the Party Animals. And that's when we see each of their specialties highlighted, as for instance, Edward Nygma starts analyzing the tech behind the mask, Oswald Cobblepot explains that they're not in for any weapon business moves as they had killed anyone that tried making a deal with them, while Harvey Dent discussed how he doesn't think it's about taking down Gordon for the next election or anything political, but he nonetheless lets Bruce in on the fact that Gordon's competition, aka Mayor Hill, has been taking in an insane amount of money into some new purse that he calls his golden chest. And so Bruce goes to Mayor Hill's office to check out his sketchy activity and comes across a file called Ark M that he tries to open, only to be greeted by a video of the Party Animals leader, which is basically absolute Black Mask. Black Mask tells Bruce that he truly likes him and thus wants to make him an offer, but he'd like him to think about it first, as the tipped off police and his goons start to surround the building, forcing Bruce to quickly dip, where he's then met by Alfred, who offers him a ride, only for Bruce to reveal that they're standing in one, as we then see the absolute Batmobile. Alfred wasn't given much time to explain himself, but he nonetheless expresses that he and Batman can make a great team, as he then reveals info about Black Mask, stating that his name is Roman Sionis. He then tries to convince Bruce to take Roman's offer, cause it surely has to be life-changing money that he can possibly use to make Batman bigger, but also because the transaction can help Alfred track Roman quicker. Batman refused to compromise to save Gotham cause he saw it as quitting, so he just kicked Alfred out of his vehicle and then got on his way to Edward Nygma, who introduces Bruce to the robot he created that basically contained 80% of the human knowledge. Bruce therefore quickly asks it how the Party Animals' ape skulls work, to which the robot explains that the masks gave its wearer a crypto wallet connected to a network of cryptocurrency called the Black Coin, so that it can pay them when they complete the different tasks or take out the targets that it provides them, which basically explained why Roman's goons were out there grinding so hard, but the crypto network was nevertheless so complicated and thus impossible to break. Bruce then gets interrupted by a call from Harvey Dent telling him that he looked deeper into Mayor Hill's Ark M file and discovered that the funding came from a company that builds private prisons and black sites. Bruce therefore digs deeper and goes out with Alfred to take a closer look at some of those black sites that Harvey was talking about and finds out there are different versions in different places like Ark A, Ark B, and so on. Meanwhile, Roman Mayor Hill and Gordon's friend Bullock are all on one yacht basically planning a political takeover, which they quickly get going, but things really get hectic for Bruce when he finds out that his mom is apparently stepping up as Gordon's deputy mayor, which meant that she'd become a target for Roman and Hill. So with all of this pressure, Bruce saw no option but to go ahead and accept a $200 million payment from Roman to stop being Batman for 1 week so that Roman can go easy on the city but also finish his business. And because the deal was made on the Memorial Day of Thomas's death, Bruce started thinking back about how sad he was after the death of his father. Until his friends came around, especially Selina, who despite being as miserable as him, tried her best to make him happy. But most importantly though, he thought back to his first year of being Batman and how he straight up was an insane vampire biting thugs in the neck to inject them with stuff until he found himself with a gun in his hand and realized that he's thinking too silly and small, and therefore went ahead and applied some of his father's advice and began shifting his goals towards becoming more than just one man by tackling the conflict from its roots and whatnot. But now back to present day, he's on his way to meet with Black Mask after they had made their deal, only to tell him that he already spent the $200 million on something in less than 1 day, which kinda shocked Roman until we see that Bruce had stacked all of the money in the form of a bat on top of the memorial light for his father and set it all on fire to make the signal shine in the sky. The deal was then obviously off, as Bruce then made the goons regret the day they were born until they managed to trap him, where Roman then got to break his arm, only for Bruce to smile in his face, revealing that he had broadcast all of Roman's confessions to the entirety of Gotham. But Roman didn't even care, as he then made his goon stab Batman multiple times before setting him on fire and throwing him off a building, which would have killed him if it wasn't for his tentacles turning into a parachute. The paid off GCPD quickly started shooting and chasing him, trying to take him in, until Barbara saw him and let him run away. And so while he was patching himself, Alfred showed up mad at him for burning the bribe money, telling him that he'll never help him again, forcing him to go and ask his friends for help, ultimately revealing to them that he's Batman. Roman then started addressing the whole city, reminding them how messed up the system is for making them slave for pennies, which he tells them they no longer have to do, as now they can just pick up masks and weapons from the street and take out a few people with bounties on their heads to collect big time money. This obviously turned the city into absolute chaos in just a few hours, as even Martha and Jim Gordon had millions on their head. But by the time that happened, Bruce had revealed his identity to all of his friends, who were a bit frustrated but nonetheless helped him to get on Black Mask's yacht, where he'd then go through Roman's goons one by one, literally kicking them off the ship, till he eventually got to face Roman himself, who he didn't show no mercy, as he ends up smashing his head with his horns and then dragged him into the water, where he then finally got to take out the servers and bomb up the entire yacht to disable all the party animals' helmets. Bruce, however, passed out and started drowning until Alfred came back and rescued him after a motivational conversation with his daughter. And just when things seem to be settling, we see Joker with seemingly babies around him ordering for Bane to be called up, as we then see Bane crashing through a door to interrupt a peace treaty between two nations and ultimately force them to go to war with each other before he got the call to come to Gotham. Back to Gotham, however, Gordon loses the mayor race to Hill, who instantly puts Gotham under a lockdown with some sort of curfew due to the Black Mask situation. Bruce doesn't wait much around before he gets back on the Ark M prison case, as he instantly asks his friend Matches Malone to provide him with papers that can get him on the work crew of Ark M, which Matches successfully does, only to get his head blown up by a certain bacterium right in front of Bruce, who then takes his phone. He nevertheless goes out with his childhood friends to honor him and whatnot before his friends start lashing out on him because he didn't want to involve them in Batman stuff no more, as he then leaves to check out a company called V-Corps that, according to Matches' phone, had some connections to Ark M. He enters the company as a city engineer and was immediately greeted by one of the employees, who Bruce asks about Victor Freeze and his wife, only for him to reveal that they were frozen and that he is their son Victor Jr., who then explained that this is a place where people get frozen until cures for their death can be found. And so while Bruce is looking at the same bacterium that killed Matches, Victor reveals that he was actually frozen once because of a terminal illness he had, but upon being revived he realized that ice is not no cure, it creates monsters just like the one he's transforming into, as he freezes Bruce unconscious. He then drags him into a freeze chamber surrounded by hundreds of frozen billionaires' bodies who were trying to escape death, not knowing that this is worse than it. And as soon as the freezing started, Bruce's memories started to flood, revealing that Matches also blamed himself for the death of Bruce's dad, because he was the last kid to hide, forcing Thomas to go out for him and get killed. Bruce eventually reaches for the gadgets he had in his cast to break out of the chamber, all while Victor is talking to the Joker about the artificial snowfall he's been sending on Gotham to get the genetic profile on anyone whose skin touches snow, which they obviously want to use to know which humans are best for scientific experiments in Ark M. However, by the time that happened, Bruce pulled up and started setting Victor on fire, which escalated to a big fight until he thought back to Wayland's advice earlier about being a survivor and thus decided to dip out of there. And so while gliding Getting out of there, he called Waylon, thanking him for his advice, telling him that he'll fill him in later, only for Waylon to end up kidnapped right after. Batman therefore went on a relentless rampage for 2 weeks straight, taking down so many men to find Waylon that the hospital literally ran out of ambulances, all while getting constant flashbacks from back in the day when him and Waylon were training for one of Waylon's upcoming boxing matches, and some shots that establish a relationship between him and Selena Kyle. Until he approached Barbara Gordon, who revealed to him that someone had made it so it looked like Waylon was taken by the police on paper. Bruce took the files she gave him and then went to hold a meeting with his friend and Alfred, where they realized that the files hinted at Waylon being in Ark M, and so eventually, after coming up with a plan for Bruce to get in Ark M, Ozzy seemingly thought it was a crazy idea until Batman lashed out at him and broke the table, as that's when Ozzy expresses that he never said they shouldn't do it. Alfred then got Bruce ready to dive in the ocean, where he actually contemplated telling him some things, as we see him looking at pictures of Deathstroke, who seemingly was his partner in an old war against Bane, but it was too late cause all communications got cut off as Bruce dove deep, going through pipelines and vents till he eventually snuck into the real Ark M and was quickly met by a horrifying man-bat experiment before Bane himself showed up and kicked him in his chest, only to then fight Bruce and basically predict his every move to break his bones, with Bruce accusing him of being juiced up. Only then Bane actually decided to use the venom juice and expand himself into a giant before picking Bruce up, telling his guys to prepare him for surgery. Bruce went missing for a few days with his mom looking for him, but to no avail, because he was naked and unconscious in a cell where he was very closely monitored by a doctor who explains how hard it was to get Bruce in the cell despite him being unconscious, because he was so heavy that it caused too many back injuries, and because they had to confiscate all the hidden traps and weapons that he had, which also caused many injuries. Shortly after that, however, Bruce pulled out a pin from his mouth to pick the lock on his cell, only to go out and pass by terrifying experiments like Clayface that consisted of bodies molded together, until Bane showed up and knocked him out once more to take him back in his cell and make him stay there for 45 days to closely track his behavior. But then one day he catches the doctors off guard and starts brutally fighting them with his fists that he literally modified with his own teeth. He ran for his life, screaming to the top of his lungs, till he stumbled upon what's basically the absolute poison ivy, which was a whole ecosystem filled with weird creatures. Bane then once again knocked him out and put him in his cell so that he undergoes 2 weeks of crazy venom surgeries. The doctors wanted to ensure that Bruce's spirit was completely broken and thus put his Batman gear in front of him as a test, only for him to actually take it and prove them wrong. Bane would have still beat him and put him back in that cell if it wasn't for Bruce accidentally breaking the chamber that contained none other than Killer Croc, aka Waylon Jones. Croc lashed out at Bane soon as he got out and started eating the doctors until Bruce calmed him down, realizing that it's actually Waylon, before he then got on his back and finally managed to escape Ark M through the sewers. Bane was then done stating that it's time to truly break Batman, as we then see him going out to the city, which is when Alfred finally tells us more about Bane. He tells us how Bane grew up on Santa Prisca, an island that was constantly in a war about power, until Bane's father and his group of rebels who always believed in peace managed to overtake it. However, soon after, foreign fighters would show up and put them all in prison, but his dad never lost hope, talking about how the bird on their flag would rise for freedom, which Bane just could never imagine. And so after 11 years of torture, Bane manages to lead the group into a breakout where his dad would give him the mask, telling him that he's the freedom bird. However, upon crossing the bay, they were met by the Joker, who convinced Bane that peace will never win and that the only way is force, which was the push Bane needed to finally kill his dad. He then went to work for Joker full time, destroying and killing any form of diplomacy or peace, eventually coming across venom that would enhance him and allow him to hold the knowledge of entire libraries in his head. We then move back to the present day, where we see Bane finally confronting Batman and cutting his arms off and forcing him to undergo a venom surgery, so that he ultimately realizes that war will be the only solution for Gotham, and only then his agreement with the Joker ends, as we see him getting back to his wife and kids on Santa Prisca that'll supposedly be forever protected by the Joker, only for us to see that it was just what Alfred imagined Bane would be doing if he ever captures Bruce. But what Bane was actually doing in Gotham is going after all of Bruce's friends while Bruce is in the sewers, trying to convince Waylon that he'll find a cure for him, which Waylon didn't want at all, begging Bruce to just off him, but Bruce just couldn't, which absolutely enraged Croc, who ended up leaving Bruce only for him to wake up in a safe house with Alfred explaining that he's been out for 20 days straight. He told Bruce that he needed more time to recover from the venom surgeries, but Bruce didn't care, as he quickly left to check on his loved ones despite having venom headaches. Martha slapped Bruce in the face and then broke down, expressing how worried she was for him, especially after what happened to Ozzy. Bruce was shocked to hear that something had happened to his friend and quickly went to check up on him, only to see him completely disfigured, as he then gets an explanation of how all of Ozzy's bones were broken by Bane, before he was informed that the same had happened to the rest of his friends, as he then goes and sees that Harvey's skull was broken in half, with one of the sides having been set on fire. Harvey expressed that from now on he only hated Bruce half of the time, as Bruce went out of the hospital to check up on Eddie in his lab, hoping that Bane hadn't gotten to him, only for Eddie to reveal that Bane challenged him into a battle of wits where he would have allowed him to kill him if he won. But Eddie lost and got his brain smashed smashed into his skull, giving him no option but to merge himself with his extremely smart robot, which he was very fine with refusing to go to any hospital. Bruce was raging, wanting revenge more than ever as he goes back to Alfred's safe house to prepare for the upcoming battle with Bane, where he then lashes out at the Red Hood gang who he was supposed to work with, until all of the sudden alarms went off with Alfred getting picked up and slammed down with a rope by the one and only absolute Catwoman. Selina wasn't really welcomed by the two, but she nonetheless explained that she was only here because Martha had called her up when Bruce was missing. Based off the flashbacks and this, Selina and Bruce seem to have had a very strong relationship that somewhere along the way broke. But despite Bruce acting like he didn't want to see her face, he ended up folding as the two spent an intimate night together. Before they went out to talk things out with the Red Hood gang and hopefully get them on their side, but things quickly went south, forcing Bruce to accidentally use the venom to protect Selina. The Red Hood gang insisted on taking the two down until Bruce opened up about what happened to him at Ark M and managed to convince their leader, aka Absolute Harley Quinn, to squash the beef and have them fight by his side, while on the other hand, Bane was successfully getting pushed further by the doctors at Ark M, but he didn't care much, expressing that he just wants to capture Batman so that Joker can have his new Bane replacement and finally allow him to go to Santa Prisca to his wife and kids. Right as Batman broadcast himself to the entirety of Gotham, exposing what's happening in Ark M and the corruption in the GCPD, he promises that this time he'll take matters into his own, unlike what he did with Black Mask, as he then publicly challenges Bane into a fight tomorrow at an arena before letting everyone know that he's indeed Batman. Bruce was obviously gonna use the venom to win this fight, which Selina wasn't really on board with, as she then ends up leaving. Alfred encouraged Bruce to do whatever he can to win, which Bruce was already doing, as we see him leaving meat out for Killer Croc to have him on his side on the day of the fight. The next night, however, Mayor Hill denied everything Batman said, insisting that everyone should abide by the 11 p.m. curfew. Bane nevertheless was on his way out to the arena, where Harley and her gang lit up the stadium and unleashed all of their drones to start filming. The show quickly started with Bruce having a whole building collapse on Bane, which he easily goes through, only for Alfred to jam the Batmobile into his back. Bane throws it away but then gets his eye plucked out by Bruce, who just kept violently coming at him while Bane is just slamming him around, trying to force him into using his venom. Harley eventually unleashed Killer Croc into the air to start biting off chunks of Bane, which gave Bruce enough time to cut through Bane's back and slash into him as much as possible. But Bane kept coming up, using more and more venom, transforming into an even bigger state, smashing Bruce as much as possible until Bruce finally decided to use his own venom, only for Catwoman to show up and start shooting venom-filled darts at Bane, blasting him with so much venom that he just exploded, as it then turns out that Bruce had made Eddie extract all of the venom outside of him into small darts. Bruce then poured all of Bane's remains into the ocean, which Ozzy and Harvey watched on the news while Catwoman was getting away on plane with a tube of venom. The only things left of Bane's consciousness were his eyes and brains, which Joker ended up talking to him through just to show him a video of him nuking his entire island Santa Prisca. And so with things somewhat settling, Alfred felt it was the right time to tell Bruce about the Joker and ultimately make him consider going back to his 9 to 5. He explains that Joker's great-grandfather Jack grew up an orphan in the 1800s and was the funniest street performer until he eventually built his own theaters and made so much money making the people laugh the loudest. He never laughed once and spent the rest of his life mysteriously donating to children causes till he died in 1938. His legacy nevertheless carried on with his son Jack Jr., then his son's son Jack II, who invested in early television, then Jack III and the fourth, who made a shift to cable network dedicated to children's shows and comedies, until the fifth current and most successful Jack came around to make trillions off of software and online gaming, all while still devoting himself to charities and opening orphanages. Bruce, however, didn't see what's scary about an average billionaire who made his money making Americans laugh and now owns hundreds of islands to supposedly hunt animals in his free time, so he pressured Alfred to tell him about his own investigation and what he believes instead of what's true on paper. Alfred thus revealed that the great-grandfather performed in front of a dentist around the same time the laughing gas was introduced to dentistry. Jack was therefore stealing the gas and leaking it to make people laugh and persuade them to give him all their money just so that he can kill them by possibly shaking their hands with poison. And ever since then, anyone that would dare stand in the way of the Jack family would be offed like one of Alfred's own associates once was. They were the most powerful crime family in history because they lived life like clowns playing the fools while making fools of everyone else. For centuries, they created diseases just to manufacture the cures while funding whole countries during the world wars and playing both sides just to profit. However, the only records of their laughter were at the site of testing the most dangerous viruses and weapons, meaning that there must be a darker project behind all of this. Because ever since the ancient times, the clown's whole act was to mock humanity because it hates it, and so Alfred reveals that he believes that there was never a family but only one seemingly immortal Jack who's been using his island to put his enemies there, and then wait to use the children from his orphanages to somehow extract their cells and become something terrible that only laughs when it's too late for his enemies to hear him. Batman then expressed that he heard enough, as he then leaves to check on Wayland, only for us to see Joker down in Gotham talking to his butler before going down to his cave. And with that, the 15th issue of Absolute Batman ends until Batman Batman meets absolute Wonder Woman next month on the 21st of January.